everybody, this is the Wikstrand. So do you know where your film critic is at 4 o'clock in the morning? Well, I'm here at Odenplan to review a movie that I actually rewatched just, the other day, just to figure out if the rating I gave it almost quarter of a century ago is actually valid. And for some reason, it was. You see, we were roaming around, in some video stores back in the late 90s, and then all of a sudden we saw, the Patriot, and we looked at each other and said, did we miss this at the cinema or something like that? When did Steven Seagal come out with this stuff? Now, granted, we didn't see, any of the Seagal movies at the cinema. We had too high of a standards for that, but we had a tendency of sometimes, renting it on VHS, to see it then, so we could, poke fun of how ludicrous everything was and, how over the top and silly Steven Seagal movies were. But this movie somehow, had slipped past us, and it was mainly because of the financial failure of Fire Down Below a year prior. So this one skipped cinematic releases in, most countries. It did have, some limited releases here and there, but the thing was, when I watched this movie finally a few years after it was released, I kind of understood why this one skipped a cinematic release, because it was all sorts of bad. It was so horrible, in fact, we couldn't even poke fun at how bad it was. The thing was that, after the movie Half Past Dead was released 2002, Steven Seagal's career went all dead, essentially, and and almost everything he has done after that has been all sorts of absolutely terrible. But I thought that, considering how bad they have been and how, bad the productions have been and how awful Steven Seagal was, how fat and immobile and just flat out boring he has become, I thought to myself, well, because now we're going to watch, 90s Steven Seagal, not fat, immobile Steven Seagal, maybe it will be better. But it turned out it wasn't. And it was because the, movies that was released during the 2000s and the 2010s, they are horribly cheap, awful action movies. But at least they had action. This movie had nothing. This is one of the most boring and uninteresting movies, and somehow bizarrely structured movies I've ever seen. But let's find out why this is actually one of the single worst movies that Steven Seagal has ever done. This is The Patriot. So The Patriot begins with a cowboy Steven Seagal that thinks he is in the movie Ride the High Country or something like that. And, we're seeing him, rescuing the most adorable little horse you've ever seen. His daughter's horse, by the way. And they have this, ranch in Montana. But the ranch is not the only thing that Steven Seagal is preoccupied with. He's also the town's doctor who, treats patients and gets paid in blackberry pies for some reason. Okay then, so where is this taking us? When are we going to get some action? When are we going to get, Steven Seagal beating up people in teeth-clenching, sadistic and violent ways? Well, we're going to have to wait a little bit for it, because we have these right-wing lunatics who has formed this gun nut militia thing, and I've been having this stand up with the authorities because their leader is accused of weapon charges or stuff like that. It doesn't really matter that much, because he gives himself up to the authorities unexpectedly, but not before injecting himself with some kind of a government manufactured virus of some description. By the way, did we ever find out where they got this super duper secret virus from? Did they raid some lab or something like that? Something that could have been shown in the movie's beginning or something like that? I don't know. So anyway, so the infected militia leader now infect the rest of the town. To what end? I don't know. And once virtually, the entire town is sick and it has been, sealed off by the authorities, outbreak style, the leader of the militia expects, some kind of a cure to be, rolled out. But the virus has mutated, and the cure that they expected to work didn't work. That has to be put in the whoopsie column, in my opinion. So what are they going to do now? Well, they, spring him free from prison, and then they take over the hospital, only to find out that there is actually a patient who is not only immune to the virus, but also actively fighting the virus. And who is that patient? That is, of course, Steven Seagal's daughter. Steven Seagal is also immune to the whole thing, but that was because, when the virus was creeping up on Steven Seagal, it said, oh shit, it's Steven Seagal, I better go in, some other direction. So, the militia wants Steven Seagal's daughter, but he beats up one of the militia guys, kills a coke machine, and then, he flees with his daughter, and is now on the run from the militia who is after them, and they're also going to try to find out, why she is immune, and if they can fight the virus together. That is essentially sort of what this movie is. Okay, so there is something here. I think that is one of the reasons why I think that I look at this movie so unfavorably, because considering, these bad movies that he did during the 2000s, the 2010s, they're bad, they're shallow, and they're pointless, and they have, bad production quality and stuff like that. This one has, good cinematography. There is, something here. The production is good, with the helicopters and stuff like that. And the idea, with the militia and the virus and, their miscalculations, there is something here. But they had all this stuff on the table, and yet they decide to do this horrendously boring nonsense thing. Because Steven Seagal is not a good actor. Steven Seagal is one of the worst actors of all time, but there is something here. There is something cathartic about seeing him beat up a bunch of guys and running comically like a girl, and having this weird persona that for some reason kind of sort of works by how it does not work. But the thing is that 90s Steven Seagal actually also had some charm. But if you're going to do a Steven Seagal movie, do a Steven Seagal movie. And this is not a Steven Seagal movie. I think that Steven Seagal beats up more monitors than people in this movie. And there is so little action, and there is so little stuff happens. And kudos for Steven for trying something new. But here's the thing. If you're going to do something new, if you're going to do something a little bit outside of your comfort zone, then have him portray another type of character than we usually do. He is still, the soft-spoken but incredibly threatening Steven Seagal character that we've seen in tons of other movies. But the fact is that he doesn't do anything. As I said, he probably kills off more monitors than people in this movie. Because, most of the action is performed by, the militia or Steven Seagal's partner, and, with the dynamite and stuff like that. But the fact is that the action that is here isn't very impressive, and when Steven Seagal doesn't do anything impressive either, we're just left with this incredibly boring movie where absolutely nothing happens. And I was hoping that maybe they could have fixed this, with a great finale where, tons of these militias are being, killed off by Steven Seagal, but we just have this very boring conversation which feels like a passive-aggressive exchange on Twitter or something like that. So it's just so boring, and the entirety of the finale is both underwhelming and corny and incredibly stupid. The only thing that would have been more stupid, but arguably would have been a lot more entertaining, would probably have been if Steven Seagal would have, beaten up the actual virus, some kind of a representation of the virus. It would have been ludicrous, but it would have been something. This was nothing. So The Patriot is a slow-moving, uninteresting drama thriller, essentially, with very little things going on. It's essentially a bad version of Outbreak, where they have replaced Donald Sutherland, Kevin Spacey, and Dustin Hoffman with Steven Seagal. It's like replacing 3 fantastic sports cars with one old broken down Datsun or something like that. It's not a very good idea. And as I said, if Steven Seagal could have done anything else, than putting on a pair of glasses at one point to make him look a little bit different, then maybe this could have worked. But now we just have regular old Steven Seagal not doing the cool Steven Seagal things and just sits around and looking bored. And the rest of the characters in this movie are so forgettable and barely has anything else to do. And our militia leader is not even that interesting of a character. And as I said, the finale was just so boring, bland, and what? That's it? So The Patriot is a movie that you should definitely, oh yes, most definitely, you should skip it, because if you don't like Steven Seagal movies, you think that this movie is even worse than its regular ones because, well, nothing happens. If you like Steven Seagal, you'll say, well, all the bits and pieces are here. They just decided not to do anything cool with it. So, I in fact prefer actually most of the movies that he did in the 2000s and the 2010s rather than this one. There are a couple of exceptions that is actually a lot worse than this movie, but still, this is one of Steven Seagal's maybe 5 worst movies I've ever seen. I haven't seen all the movies he has done, but of the movies that I have seen with Steven Seagal, I can only think of 3, maybe 4 movies that are worse than this one. And I actually believe that this movie was going to be a far better movie than I remembered it to be, simply put because of, the better production value. But for some reason, that didn't happen. Mainly because, well, this movie is just so boring and nothing happens. Maybe if they would have replaced Steven Seagal with somebody else, you could have done something with it. Or if they would have made it a more traditional Steven Seagal movie, then it probably also would have, become a much better movie. But now they decided not to do that. They decided to try something else, but they failed spectacularly with it. This movie is not very good. In fact, it is one of the worst movies of the late 90s, and that is fucking saying something. The Patriot is dry, dull, and boring. I cannot give this movie any more than 2 points. A bad Steven Seagal movie is one thing, but a bad and boring Steven Seagal movie, holy shit. I mean, he is better in this movie than he is in most of the, post-2000 movies that he has done. But on the other hand, he doesn't do anything cool. And as I've said, this movie barely features any exciting things whatsoever. This movie absolutely sucks. So what do you think about The Patriot? Comment below and I'll see you next time from, well, so-and-so reviewing, well, such and such. Thank you for watching. Thank you very much.